Welcome to the SaaS Revolution Show. Joel Gascoigne, CEO and co-founder of Buffer. Welcome, Joel.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, great to be on here. Excited to chat.
Yeah, no, good to have you on. Over 5 years we've been doing this, and you're a hard man to get on the podcast to get to speak.
But, we have a mutual friend, Andy, as well, who has been mentioning us to each other for a while.
Yeah, I ask Andy every time I see him. Can you just have a word with Joel and see if we can get him on the show? But no, great to have you on here. For those that don't know you, Joel, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Joel Gascoigne?
Yeah, so I'm the co-founder and CEO of Buffer, and Buffer is a social media management platform for small businesses. I've been doing this for almost 10 years now. Today, this year will be we'll kind of take over the 10-year mark with the company. So that's exciting. And we have a number of different tools within our platform for customers to be able to publish to social media, to Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and other places, and then analyze the results of what they're doing, and kind of create this feedback loop for themselves, and increase their reach and work on their brand online. So that's what we do. And I kind of see myself as a problem solver at heart. I was the technical co-founder, but also love thinking about the business side, and so kind of gone through the progression of building out the first version of the product, to then really focus on the product side, to then really just thinking about the company as a whole and the strategy across all areas. So that's been a fun journey. And yeah, on the personal side, I love to get outdoors. I live in Boulder, Colorado. Been here for a couple of years, lived in a lot of different places. We're a fully remote company as well, so I've been able to travel a lot. And right now I'm really enjoying, skiing in the winter. Started snowboarding a bit as well in the past season, and then mountain biking, hiking, those kinds of things in the summer as well. So there's plenty of that here in Boulder, which is really great, and I think it has helped me, stay sane over the last couple of years in a better way than I have in other times where I've been in big cities.
Is that why you chose Boulder? Because just the range of activities, you being an outdoor person, that it sort of fit the bill for you?
Yeah, that was a big factor of it. Also, my wife had an opportunity to move with her job from New York to Boulder in the same company, so that made things easy. And we've been thinking about it for a year or two at that point already. She'd been in New York for several years, longer than I had been there, but we were both starting to feel like we started doing more regular trips upstate New York to go and hike or go kayaking or things like that, and then we go on ski trips to Utah or things like that. And so we just started to realize, we should make that more of our default than being the place that we're going to.
Why not? Makes sense. And 10 years, I mean, congrats. I actually didn't know that it had been 10 years of running Buffer. So a great achievement there, in itself. And can you share a few sort of metrics? So you're 10 years in. What is the size of the company? I saw, I don't know, however many months ago that you crossed 20 million in ARR. It may have even been last year. Yes, some metrics that I guess are all out there on the internet anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. We are just over 20 million. We actually reached 22 million, and now we've dipped back down to about 21 right now in the midst of the coronavirus situation. So that's where we are in terms of revenue. We're 89 people as a company, so we're kind of just working our way towards that 100-person mark, which feels very much within sight now. But yeah, we're also profitable. That's something that has been the case since about mid-2016. We just made a decision to operate in a sustainable way. So we generally average about 200 to 400K in monthly net profit. And so that has allowed us to have a lot of flexibility and freedom. And we did raise 2 rounds of funding. I think we might chat about this a bit more later. But we also bought out our most recent round of funding, the VC investors, the majority of those investors back in mid 2018. So we've kind of been on a winding journey of figuring out what the exact right path is for us.
I want to pick up on one thing that you said, because we will talk about some of that stuff sort of later. And again, thanks for sharing there. But so all the guests I've been having on, I guess, since mid-March, we've been asking them, around sort of, coronavirus, sort of COVID-19, what they're seeing, whether it's in marketing, sales, leading their company sort of through this. So I've got kind of 2 questions really for you on this. So you as the CEO of Buffer, what are you doing? How have you had to adapt to kind of lead, if at all, to lead your company through this? Be interested to know that. And you also sort of mentioned there that you were at 22 million in ARR, gone back to 21 point something. And so thinking about the churn sort of possibilities again, like with catering for SMBs, and I think you do some enterprise as well. But we are seeing and kind of hearing that a lot of SMBs, either because they'll go out of business, which has always been a risk of why people will churn. But in a downturn, how does a company that is catering towards SMBs look to kind of prevent the churn? So just be interested in both of those.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have seen quite an impact from COVID-19, and I guess there's a few different aspects of that. Actually, one of the things that I did pretty early on in the process was to kind of create 3 different task forces within mainly in the leadership team to tackle different aspects of what we were seeing. So those are the team. How is the team affected, and what can we do for them to get them through this period? And then customers, what's going on with customers? How are they being impacted here, and how can we help them? And then business was the other aspect, which was how can we make sure that as a company we get through this as unscathed as possible, kind of from a business standpoint, finances, things like that. And I think that has really helped us to move much more rapidly, make faster decisions, but also be bolder in the ways that we could help, because some of these things were initially felt very challenging, because how can we know how much we could help customers if that's going to have a financial impact on us, when we also want to make sure that as a company and for the team we're doing all we can to help them with job security and everything. So separating out into these kind of task forces helped us to be bold and go far in each direction. So one of the things we've done for customers, just to start with them, you mentioned SMB. That's definitely we really don't have almost any enterprise. We have maybe a handful, but we are fully focused on the small business market. We have 70,000 paying customers. So if you think about that in terms of 20 million in ARR, the average revenue per customer is pretty low for us. And so that's something that, as you say, we feel in all times. There's kind of this higher level of churn. There's businesses that are figuring things out and sometimes failing along the way. And this, I think, for us, COVID-19 was this wave of, okay, that's happening all at once for a large group of customers. And we've seen that, a portion of our customers, maybe 10 to 20%, are physical businesses like hair salons and coffee shops and restaurants and all these kinds of businesses. And so all of those immediately had to close down and really struggling or having to adapt their businesses massively, even if they even could continue on. And so one of the things we put in place pretty quickly was what we've called the COVID-19 Customer Assistance Program. And we put aside $500,000 to help customers in various ways. And that's essentially doing extended trials for any new customers that wanted to try out Buffer. So we're doing 90-day trials for customers that have been impacted that have that need. And then for our existing customers, we've done a lot for them. So we created a form for them to get in touch, or if they were proactively already getting in touch saying that they were struggling. Then we've been waiving payments for 3 months for customers, without really very much, many hoops to get through or anything like that. Allowing people to pause their subscription for a little bit if they need to. So yeah, all of that's been helping them, I think, a lot. And we found, some customers, they've had a huge impact in terms of their income, but they could still really use a tool like Buffer for their, social media marketing. And so that's where we've been, waiving payments and just trying to help as much as we can. We're luckily not as impacted overall, so we can help quite a bit, and hopefully that loyalty, that will also come back in terms of loyalty, and those customers will be able to get through the period with a tiny bit of help from us, but hopefully in the ways they're creative and other ways they can get through it, and then we'll still have them as a customer rather than having them churned. But we certainly have seen a much higher level of churn than we normally would, and we've just had to keep an eye on all of that and be kind of re-projecting things on almost a weekly basis and making decisions around the business. For the team, I think the biggest impact has been around a much higher level of anxiety, lower productivity, just struggling, and then people all in very different situations. If you have kids, that's a much different situation, having to suddenly become the main one in charge of their education is a huge thing. So we've been really trying to keep a pulse on the team and the different ways that different folks are affected. And we've done a number of things. We've really relaxed any kind of productivity expectations. We've adjusted deadlines. And then one of the things we've also done, which we just got started with, is for all of May, we're doing a 4-day work week. And really the idea around that is that, there's just this layer of added stress, and we just want to give people a bit more space. And so that's at full pay with no expectations for them to get as much in 4 days as they were in 5 or anything like that. So those are some of the things we've done kind of across the board. And yeah, I think it's been working out pretty well so far. The team, I think, especially, has been happy with how quickly we've sprung into action to put things into place. Yeah.
Yeah, no, great stuff, great initiatives there. I think similarly, we're seeing that, as probably all companies, that level of anxiety, kind of increase. Yeah. And given the nature of our business, again, we come into this as an events business. Events are always quite stressful, and so yeah. we have an upcoming event with the added anxiety, of COVID-19, kind of on top of us, right? And so I'm sort of conscious about that, and we'll be doing each month. The team have a 3-day kind of weekend each month, actually, sort of like, moving forward. So we get a bit more time to, recharge the batteries over a 3-day week, so or 3-day weekend.
That's great. Yeah. In terms of events, we have the thing we do is that we have this annual company retreat, because we're fully remote. So we all usually get together once a year in a different place each year. And so that was one of the first things that we had to do, was to kind of cancel or reschedule that. So that was meant to be in July in Athens, and so we had to postpone that. And we're going to do it virtually, I think, but probably in August or something like that. So we're starting to work towards that. I have a couple of friends who are founders of other kind of remote companies that have already done virtual retreats, and so kind of learning from them as well.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to get some notes from that, not necessarily from I guess both from a virtual retreat perspective, but also, like, I was just talking today, after SaaStock Remote is done, usually, let's say we'd be in Dublin or something, and we would celebrate, after the conference is done, and let our hair down. But here, like, everybody's going to be stuck at home. So just kind of thinking about ways that we can celebrate virtually. And we have been doing virtual happy hours, every week, but I've got to think about something different for that. So wanted to just go a little bit into the past, or in fact, actually quite back in the past, before we go through the journey back to the present, and a little bit just about the founding story of Buffer. So as you said, like 10 years well, let's go back to kind of 10 years ago. Like, how did you come up with the idea? You know, why? Tell us a little bit about that founding story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from the UK originally, and I went to Warwick University, and since I had graduated from there, I kind of knew that I wanted to figure out some kind of startup or product or project that I could make work. I was working as a freelance or contract web developer, and so I kind of had this fairly flexible and good income. And then I had a lot of friends that kind of became started running agencies and things like that. But I knew that I wanted to figure out a product that I could kind of really have this income that was not tied to my time. So that was a key goal of mine early on. Tried a few different things that didn't really work out. And then with Buffer, it was really came from a personal problem that I found myself having. And this was, so back in 2009, 2010, I was basically reading articles around, products or startups or different topics. And I was wanting to kind of form a network and learn from others around that. And when I was at university, there was an entrepreneurship kind of society and had a lot of really good discussions with people there. But after I'd left, I'd gone back to my hometown, Sheffield, and found out, I don't really have this network anymore. So what I did was I started sharing these articles on Twitter and just building up my network on Twitter, and found that to work really well. And as soon as it did work, I realized, I want to do that more. So this was kind of in the times of like Google Reader. I would be reading, blogs on there, and then sharing blog posts, and just kind of that would just drive discussion. And fairly quickly, I found myself not wanting to be sharing the article at the exact time that I was, just finished reading it, because I would read, 10 articles in a row and just tweet 10 times. And so then I would flood my, stream for my followers, and for myself, there would be nothing else that I was sharing for the rest of the day. So I thought, I just want to space out these tweets, this content. And so I looked around. There was, at the time, it was really Hootsuite and TweetDeck that were the key ones that existed. And they had a feature to schedule a tweet, but you had to pick the date and then the time, separately. So it was quite a process. And so it was really significantly harder to schedule something than it was to just tweet it normally. So I thought, well, what if you chosen a schedule in advance, and you just say, I want to tweet 3 times a day or 4 times a day, and you kind of end up with this queue of content that you can just like throw the content into that queue, and then it's taken care of. So that was really the initial idea that I had, was this concept of the pre-scheduled time slots and the queue, and making it as easy to tweet in a schedule as it is to just do a live real-time tweet. So yeah, that was kind of the first idea, and build that out. I learned a lot from previous failures in terms of just kind of getting out, that whole idea of getting out the building, talking to customers. I had not done that very well. I had just built what I thought I needed. And so this time around, I decided to really try and test the idea out in a better way. So that's really where like the lean startup concepts I'd come across at that time as well, and just really leaned into them. So had a landing page without the product existing, just to learn about the interest in it. And all of that went really well, and kind of went from having the idea to launching the first really minimal version of the product in about, it was 7 weeks, and then launched it, and had a friend that paid for it on the first day that I kind of discarded, of like, okay, that doesn't fully count. And then, but luckily on the third day, had the first paying customer that I didn't know who it was. And then we kind of like were, off on our way. And then about 2 months later, my co-founder, Leo, joined me, and we'd been in touch. We actually met at Warwick University. And we'd been in touch for a while. We'd had different ideas and tried to help each other out. And it didn't make sense before that point to kind of work together on something. But he got in touch and said, oh, how's it going? And I said, well, I've got this new thing that's actually seems like it's starting to work out. It was very early days at that point. First month revenue was $20 in total. So, but yeah, then he just kind of was excited to chip in and volunteer, and he really got going on the marketing side. And so we kind of really built out the whole like content marketing engine and for our growth. And over the course of the next year, we really grew quite substantially. And so that's what then allowed us to kind of travel to San Francisco in the summer of 2011 after we'd started. And we had some ups and downs with getting kind of initial funding, but we decided that it made sense to do that. And we eventually got into the AngelPad accelerator, which we went through and then kind of finished at the end of 2011 and raised our seed round at the end of that. So that's kind of really how we got things off the ground.
So would you say content marketing was the main channel for you to create that awareness in the initial days? I mean, certainly I remember, I mean, when I started SaaScribe, the blog, which kind of preceded SaaStock, everybody, like including myself, was reading Buffer content, right? And you guys have always been doing a great job there. So was that the main kind of focus and driver?
Yeah, that was the primary kind of engine of growth, I would say. And it started out, I think a lot of people know about the Buffer blog now and like our content on there. Actually really started out with guest articles on other blogs because we realized we didn't have really an audience of our own. So that was, I think, one of the key things that Leo figured out early on is, we this is a way to get in. And it was really about genuinely trying to write really high quality content that we could offer to a blog that already had an existing like sizable audience. But then we had the author line and links and things back to our own blog, and that's how we actually started to build out our own blog. And then eventually we had enough kind of audience and traffic to really stand by ourselves. And I think the other key aspect was word of mouth. I think when you are working with small businesses, that's a huge potential growth engine as well. So it was really, I think, focusing on the quality of the product, really responsive and really on point customer service as well, and then this great content. And I think those were kind of the three things that really drove our rapid, and I think freemium as well was absolutely key to us, because we just increased. So we were a very low price point and had the free plan initially, and that was what really got us growing fast.
So you always had the free plan. You still have that today?
We do. We still have it today. It's been a little bit of a interesting journey of figuring out how. I think a lot of things have evolved over the years, especially in social media and with the platforms that we're on top of, Facebook and Twitter and things. So that's been an interesting journey. But we still do have it. It's a bit more hidden away, but I think it has been historically a really key part of our growth. And I think one of the interesting things is that, and this is where, in some ways, buying out our investors is a powerful move we made, because I think freemium for us created this huge reach for. So I think it was in some ways a powerful brand play and I think people know Buffer like far more than they maybe should, and I think it's the freemium, but combined with our transparency that we've shared a lot of our internal workings and numbers and things like that, has probably given us like this outsized brand and reach for like the size of company that we actually are. So yeah, it's a key element. We kind of have to keep evolving and figuring out whether it still makes full sense. But yeah.
Yes. So speaking of transparency, then as you said, this is something that people really know Buffer very well for, right? It's one of your values as a company, I believe, and the default to transparency, and you have a transparency dashboard. Like, how did you come? Like, what was that there from year one? And like, so why? I guess why did you choose to do this and become, I guess, this almost like radically transparent, business?
Yeah, it was always there. Although it wasn't until a couple of years in that we actually tried to, really articulate our values and put them into words. And I think that's when we set it down as a value. And then we also phrased it as default to transparency, not just transparency, which I think anyone could feel is a good thing. And that I think catapulted us to then examining almost everything across the business and saying, could this be transparent? And if it's not, then is there a really good reason why it's not? But even in the first year, I recall, had many discussions with Leo talking about transparency. And I think we kept pushing ourselves and pushing each other and questioning, why wouldn't we do that? Or why is it seen as a risk or a bad thing to do that? So I know we started sharing our kind of user sign up numbers, our revenues in the first couple of years. So we just every milestone we'd hit, we kind of share the next number. And I think one of the things that I remember is I actually had a experience before Buffer. The only job I really had was one that I did part-time, a very small company. It was about 15 people, and they eventually went out of business, and I was kind of there throughout that process. And I just remember that no one, probably 3 people out of the 15, knew the true situation of the company and how kind of bad it had got. And I think that definitely had a big impact for me, and I just found myself thinking that didn't help anyone for people to not know the financial situation of the company. We could all rally together to really try and make it, get through that period. So that was one thing. Another thing was I remember whenever I'd meet with founders in the first year or two of Buffer, I meet with people, get a coffee and try and learn, exchange experiences and learn from each other.
Yeah. So why did you build Buffer as a remote organization? And I guess then what have been the pros and cons and your kind of learnings from that?
Yeah. So early on, we kind of became remote accidentally. So we started in the UK, Leo and I, and then we both went to San Francisco, went through the accelerator program there and raised the funding. And then throughout that process, we were in the US without visas, and we started the process trying to get visas. And then we, unfortunately, there was like a cap on the amount of visas that they have each year. And so the timing was just not good, and we missed the cap got reached right when we were in the process of applying for the visas. And so that we were kind of like late in the year in 2011, and after the cap's reached, you can't even apply again till April the next year. And then even if you get the visa, which you only have a certain chance of, then you can't be in the US on the visa until October of that year. So we knew we basically had a whole year that we wouldn't be able to be in the US. And so we found ourselves, and by that point there were 3 of us. So Tom joined us as well, and we were living together in San Francisco in this apartment together. And I remember we sat down and we actually just opened up Google Maps and said, oh, where do we want to go? And Tom's from the UK as well. So Leo's from Austria, but he studied in the UK. And so we were all just feeling like, well, we can't stay in the US. We don't really want to go back to the UK. So where should we go? And we just ended up picking somewhere, and we picked Hong Kong. We decided to go to Hong Kong for 6 months. And then we ended up in Tel Aviv in Israel for 3 months after that. And we kind of just filled that year with different places and just enjoyed the traveling and working on it. And we were very productive during that time. We were just really had a lot to focus on. But we also started growing the team during that time. And the first few people that joined really came from kind of personal networks. And so I remember we had, it was really a couple of people in the UK, and then we had a couple of people that we found that joined us who were in the US. And so before we knew it, we were kind of spread all over. And it happened somewhat accidentally, but there came a point when I realized I'm going to have to make a real decision here. on which way I go with this. So I kind of just sat down and thought about the different pros and cons, and there was almost no companies that were remote at that time. But one of the things that really was actually a big factor was when for customer service, we were able to, even as a 10-person company, we were able to have 3 people in the team doing customer service, and spread one in the US, one in the UK, and one in Australia. And we had this 24/7 time coverage. And I just remember feeling, especially being in Hong Kong, made me realize this is if we have a customer in Hong Kong, why should they have a significantly worse customer service experience than a customer we have in the US or the UK if we were to be based in one of those places. And then I think beyond that, it was really the sense of freedom and the fun that we had by traveling and building the company from those different places. And I felt like, a lot of people start companies because they want more freedom than they had when they were working for somebody else. And so that was a key factor. But I think that is something that founders often kind of like lose along the way, especially when you raise a lot of funding and end up not being in control of some of those types of decisions as well. So those were really the early decisions. And I think enough of that came together for me I remember actually sending an email out to the team at that point. We were small, but kind of just setting down, we are going to be a remote company going forwards. And we actually had to start hiring deliberately. At that point, we'd done the travels. We'd actually gone back to San Francisco, and more and more of the team were interested in being in San Francisco just to see what that was like. And so once we made that decision, we had to actually deliberately hire kind of outside of San Francisco to make sure that we were fully kind of remote and spread out and didn't have like a concentration and like a bias towards one place.
Do you think there's going to be a remote revolution now in terms, obviously, what's happening with COVID?
Yeah.
Everyone's forced to work from home.
I think there is. I mean, certainly there is a remote revolution right now, right? So that's just there's no choice about it really. I think that there's probably going to be mixed results. I think the thing that I find is interesting and a bit of a struggle is just that it's hard for companies to assess the benefits, the productivity benefits they could get, because we're a remote company and we're less productive right now in this situation of COVID-19. So I think I have a feeling that it could go either way, and some companies could be productive during this time as long as they recognize how there's this layer of anxiety and stress and the COVID side of things. But then I think there's probably a lot of other companies that probably might be just eager to get back to the levels of productivity that they want or need, and they'll just kind of push things back to the office. But I think this has really been something it's just pushed things forward. I think companies, and there's a level of resilience and flexibility that comes from being remote that's been very apparent to companies right now. So I do think that I think there's already been a clear arc towards that becoming more and more of the norm and of a default. And I think this like pushed it forward significantly. So I think that journey is just going to continue now. It's really interesting for us because I think I can remember when we were in just a handful of, I could almost count 10 companies that were doing remote work, and now it's so widespread.
Yeah. No, it'd be interesting to see how it goes. And you raise good points there, just around, as you say, the productivity. Thinking about like some companies, they'll have a lot of employees who have families, and some that don't. And maybe the one like, for instance, like we've got quite a young team. I think I'm the only one with kids. And so I think, what I'm seeing is actually, maybe maintained levels of productivity. But if everybody had families, then that would be a kind of a different situation, right? So it'd be a tricky one.
Yeah. The other thing is that I think to be productive and efficient remotely takes a whole different set of tools and skills and everything. And we've spent years kind of adapting and crafting that toolkit for ourselves as a company. And now businesses are forced to immediately within a week or two figure out that setup for themselves. And I think that's going to result in a lot of broken workflows and situations.
Yeah.
And things like, oh, we should be tracking how much time our employees are working now and things like that, which is kind of the anti-pattern, I think,
Yeah.
of remote. So I think there's a lot of that that's going to be happening as well.
Obviously, we've spoken, or you've spoken, quite a bit about in the early days, your co-founders and Leo kind of only marketing, and we know, well, certainly I do, and it's been written about that both Leo and Tom, so left the business. I guess in that they still remain co-founders, but just no longer kind of active within the business, but not necessarily sort of interested in the why, because you've written about that, but now, you're the only active co-founder within the business. So how has that been for you in terms of when you have co-founders, you share the burden? Now, did it just all of a sudden overnight become you're the only one with the burden, or do you still share the burden, or like how has that worked since then? What have you done to kind of help you through that sort of period?
Yeah, I know it was very much kind of overnight. All the burden falls onto me. I think when Leo left, it was quite a clear, like, full exit from the company, and so that has been a really interesting journey. It's there's been 3 full years since then now, and so I think I've been finding my way. I think initially, the interesting thing is when you have a co-founder, you have this other person that's really very much at that kind of peer level to you, that you're just bouncing everything off and making decisions together. And suddenly, with that gone, I think the first mistake I made was leaning like almost too much on the rest of the leadership team for all of those decisions that I would make. So I've had to learn to be a lot more independent and making my own decisions. But that's really hard as well, because, having someone else to be a sounding board can help you really make decisions much more quickly, feel bold about them. And so that was a piece that I felt I was missing. And then over time, I found ways to kind of work on myself, but also I now have an executive coach that I work with, that I've been working with almost a year now, and that's been really powerful. I also I actually started working with a therapist in 2017, so that was kind of maybe the first step of that in some ways, and that just helped me have someone else to talk about beyond like my wife or girlfriend at the time, and so I think these are different. You kind of got to create this support system around yourself, and that's what I've started to see it as, is like, oh, there's almost this team that I need to create around myself as more of a solo kind of founder now. And then the other key component, I would say, is having a strong network of other founders and executives that you're in touch with regularly, and even trying to have some of them become really good friends. And I'm lucky to have, and that's been one of the interesting things, is that I think, after Leo leaving, I have these different things I've mentioned, I have much more strongly than I ever did when we were working together, even to the extent, I would say, of, there's some things that you even shouldn't just like lean on a co-founder for, like having a coach as when you're working actively with a co-founder, it would be, immensely valuable, and probably could have helped us a lot at the time. So yeah, I think those are the key aspects that I found. And I think it's really taken a few years, and I think only just in the last maybe 6 months or a year, I felt like it's really come together, and I've figured out, how I need to structure things to thrive.
Having sort of touched on there, I guess kind of, well, having this sort of surrounding group of peers, coaches, therapists, this certainly, I guess, helps businesses with certain questions that you have, but also around like the mental health, I think, kind of the side of things. Not all coaches help around mental health, some do, but certainly the therapists would as well.
Yeah.
Just thinking about like a lot of like founders, you know, they suffer from burnout at some point, you know, in time. Not all, but some. Have you ever sort of experienced that and suffered that? And also, what do you do? Obviously, you've got the therapist in place, but you know, what do you do to look after yourself, after your body and mind, to, I guess, kind of ensure that it you know, as best you can, that it doesn't happen?
Yeah, I have experienced burnout, and maybe I'll just quickly describe kind of how I got there, and then I can share a little bit of the things that I've put in place since then and try to focus on. So actually, kind of going back to 2015, 2016 time. So my co-founder Leo, he left at the beginning of 2017, but there was kind of this run-up period that we had, which got increasingly more challenging, and so we were finding ourselves on, you know, and having different vision, different ideas for where we should be taking the company, and that was, you know, 2015, certainly 2016. We were having a lot of conversations, and historically we had really done I think a great job of communication. We'd gone, you know, really try to cut through things and get deep and get on the same page. And I think in our best times of growth of the company, it was when we were rock solid and really super aligned. And I think over time we found that, you know, we'd been working together long enough. We'd seen enough of the kind of the journey so far of the company and the successes and things that we started to have differing views. And, you know, we even met in person a couple of times with a couple of other people from the leadership team to help us like mediate and go deep on things. So we were working through that throughout 2016. And then we also made a few errors during that time. And we actually had financial challenges in the middle of 2016, and we had to do a round of layoffs. So we let go of 10 people in the middle of 2016. We were 94 people at the time, and so we went down to 84. And that was just a really hard thing to go through. And we were, you know, there was this underlying kind of misalignment already there. That kind of brought us together in that moment, because we had this challenge, this crisis we needed to get through as a company. But it, you know, it once that subsided, we still had these underlying issues. And then, so we kind of kept working through it. And then beginning of 2017, that's when we kind of mutually agreed, and he decided to move on. Our CTO at the time also decided to leave at the same time. And really at that time, we kind of saw the leadership team as the company as this group of 4 of us. So Leo, and then the CTO Sunil, and then Carolyn, who is still with the company, and that's been really great. But kind of having half of that team leave was this huge kind of jolt to the company, to the system. So I immediately sprung into action again. There's kind of this crisis mode that kicks in, and you have this adrenaline, and you feel like, oh, I've got to get the company through this. So I remember distinctly, for example, I spoke with every single person in the company on an individual video call, one-on-one, at that time when Leo left, and just to explain, you know, how that had all come about. And I think part of it for me was wondering, you know, how many people in the company might be more aligned with kind of his path, and would there be some kind of exodus? That was quite worrying to me, but luckily that wasn't the case, and there wasn't a single person that left specifically around that, which I felt as a kind of a great achievement. And then a few months after that is when the burnout like really hit me. And I think when that crisis and the adrenaline subsided, and, you know, Leo had left and I was kind of more on my own, it really hit me hard. And I just remember feeling this kind of this, you know, almost depression as well, and just feeling quite alone, but also I like lost my passion for, I knew that I cared deeply about the company, but I just didn't have anything left. And I felt very kind of just struggled to have any energy. I would be exhausted within a couple of hours of working on things. And I know I was also just generally a lot more pessimistic than I normally would be. And even like, you know, just emotional. I think small thing, like things could set me off and make me kind of well up and get teary and things. So that was really quite scary, and I kind of worked with it for a couple of weeks, and then I realized like I was going to have to do something bigger to figure it out and recover from it. So I actually spoke with a few people in the leadership team, and then decided to kind of go on a indefinite leave almost. So I made a few quick decisions about delegating my responsibilities, and then I wrote something up to the whole company saying I'm just gonna, I'm feeling burned out. I was very open about it, and I'm gonna take some time off and get back to a good place. And I ended up being, I think I was off for about 6 weeks in the end. Didn't really set down a time frame in advance, but I needed about that long, and yeah, it changed everything. And I think ever since then I've just been, I think there's been this new awareness of, and even during COVID, I felt this in the first 2-3 weeks. I had this almost this energy. I felt like optimistic, and it's an awful situation going on, but I felt like I had this adrenaline that kicked in that helps me be much more nimble and think clearly, and that's what it is. It's adrenaline, but then it eventually, kind of fades away, and then but your body has been, and your mind has been taking on that toll during that time, even though it's been masked by the adrenaline. So I think that's the key thing that I've learned from there, is that I have to make sure that I take care of myself, especially after that adrenaline kind of goes off. So yeah, I think I generally now I just really, and I think at that point it was 7 years in, and now kind of coming up to 10 years in, I have no desire to push myself to the limit in order to, like short-term approaches just don't make sense at all anymore. So I've been much better about taking, regular time off and really having proper vacations. And these 4-day work weeks we're doing in May has been great. I was already doing throughout all of April. I did Wednesday afternoons off. We'll just kind of go for a hike or something. And so yeah, I'm in a much better place now. I doubt that I'll ever get to a situation like that unless there's some kind of extenuating circumstance that really gets me into a tough spot.
Awesome. And as a final question, is I think we're coming up to time, but so through the 10 years that you've been running the company, and now you've got to 22 million, or just just under 22 million. Have you thought about what is the plan the next 5 sort of 10 years? Do you still want to be CEO of Buffer in 10 years time? Do you want to get to 100 million in revenue? Do you want to sell? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I know I want to do this for a really long time. So I've thought a lot about, and I've talked about doing this for another decade and beyond. So really, I think what excites me is thinking about ways to set the company up for that long-term trajectory and to thrive during that time. And I personally want to still be running it in 10 years. And maybe that ends up not being, the right thing, and I'm open to that. But I think ultimately I'm really excited about trying to create a much longer lasting company. I think there's a lot of companies in this industry that kind of just build and flip and then move on and try the next thing and the next thing. And I think over time I've realized that there's really a big difference between building a product and building a company, and a company that actually has great financial discipline and underlying sustainability. I think a lot of companies that raise rounds and rounds of funding, and I think sometimes if I was to ask them, well, how do you plan to pay that back or give a return, or what's the plan there? I think there isn't really a plan. It's just, we'll try and sell at some point or go public. And it's really this big gamble. And I think, so that concept of what is the cost of the capital has become something that I've thought much more deeply about. And we've gone through the process of buying out some of our investors. And so that really puts it makes it suddenly very tangible of the cost of that capital. We gave our investors a return on it, and we, bought those shares back. So it came from us being profitable and creating the company in that way. So I think it's easy to end down a path where the only option is that you will have to sell at some point, but that I think is kind of a unfortunate situation, because it also means that generally it means that what you've created has to end as well. And I think I'm much more excited about a long-term evolving journey of figuring out and going through many market changes and recessions and good times and bad times. And I think that is really exciting for me, and also to try to create the company that is resilient and is on that journey as well. We've got a lot of people in the company that have now been part of Buffer for 6 years, 7 years, even more in some cases. And so yeah, that loyalty is really, I think, amazing to see. And so yeah, that's my plan right now. I think I would like Buffer to keep growing in terms of revenue and the number of people, but more just so there's more people can experience what we're doing, and the experiments we make and the ways we try and create a great life and working environment for ourselves. I think I want to strive for organic and natural growth. I have ambitions, but I also don't want to kind of force growth. I want to just ride that and see healthy growth over time.
Awesome. Well, Joel, it's been a pleasure to speak to you. It's been worth the 5-year wait, or 4-year wait, and I'm sure our audience, will share that feedback as well. Like, really appreciate you just staying true to yourself, being open and honest, and sharing all those lessons. So that's well, I would say quite a rare thing, that we have. So really appreciate that. So thank you, Joel Gascoigne, CEO, co-founder of Buffer.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, really appreciate it. Been some great questions here and just good discussion. It's been a lot of fun.